Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku faced his greatest failure. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sky above Jaku's city was no longer a sky. It was a ceiling of gray dust and suspended debris, a suffocating shroud that blotted out the sun. The air tasted of copper and ozone, thick enough to choke on, vibrating with the aftershocks of a power that shouldn't exist in the hands of a human being. Izuku Midoriya hung in the air, his limbs screaming. Every muscle fiber in his body felt like a frayed wire carrying too much voltage. The red lines of One for All coursed across his skin, glowing with a violent, erratic luminosity that mirrored the chaotic beating of his heart. He was at 45%, his current limit, but in the bursts of movement required to dodge the tendrils of destruction lashing out from the ground, he was pushing past that, flirting with the bone-breaking threshold of 100%. Below him, the ruins of the city were a graveyard of concrete. And standing in the center of the devastation, rising from a crater like a demon birthed from the earth, was Tamura Shigaraki. Or rather, the thing that used to be Tamura Shigaraki. The villain's white hair whipped around a face that was manic, ecstatic, and terrifyingly calm. His shirt was torn away, revealing the modifications, the sheer physical density of a body engineered to rival All Might. But it wasn't the physical strength that made the hairs on Izuku's arms stand up. It was the presence. A cold, heavy weight that pressed down on the soul. Eraserhead, Shigaraki's voice cut through the roar of the wind, amplified not by a quirk, but by the sheer silence that seemed to follow his movements. As long as you're watching, I can't turn this city into dust. It's annoying. 50 meters away, perched on a slab of broken reinforced concrete, Shota Aizawa kept his eyes wide open. His hair floated in a halo of defiance, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead into his left eye. But he didn't blink. He couldn't. Beside him, Manuel kept a steady stream of water washing over the teacher's eyes, a desperate, mundane countermeasure to the godlike threat in front of them. Don't let him move! Endeavor roared, his flames turning blue with intensity as he strafed the air, launching a lance of fire toward the villain. Shigaraki didn't dodge. He simply swatted the fire away with his bare hand, the sheer force of the air pressure dissipating the number one hero's attack. Without his quirks, Shigaraki was a monster. With them, he would be the end of the world. Aizawa was the only thread holding the apocalypse back. Izuku engaged his Air Force gauntlets, utilizing the pressure to correct his trajectory. I have to move. I have to be faster. Deku! Bakugo's voice cracked over the comms, though he was close enough to be heard shouting. Explosions popped like gunfire as Bakugo maneuvered to Izuku's right. Stop thinking and hit him. He's regenerating too fast. We have to crush his head or his heart before he figures out a way to kill Aizawa. Bakugo was right. He was always right when it came to combat. His instincts were razor-sharp, devoid of the hesitation that plagued others. He saw the enemy, identified the threat, and sought to neutralize it. But Izuku heard something else. Through the connection of One for All, beneath the malice and the hatred that rolled off Shigaraki in waves, Izuku felt a vibration. It was a frequency of pure, unadulterated agony. It was the sound of a child crying in a dark room, waiting for a hand that never came. Grandma Nana, is this who you wanted to save? Izuku gritted his teeth, black whip tendrils exploding from his back to grapple a falling piece of masonry. He swung himself forward, using the momentum to become a kinetic bullet. Smash! Izuku screamed, driving his heel down. Shigaraki caught the kick. The impact created a shockwave that shattered the windows of the few standing buildings 3 blocks away. Izuku's leg trembled against Shigaraki's palm. The villain's fingers dug into the iron sole of Izuku's boot, the metal groaning. You're fast, Shigaraki said, his eyes locking onto Izuku's. Red meeting green. The abyss staring into the forest. But you're predictable. You move like All Might. You think like All Might. It's sickening. Why are you doing this? The words tore out of Izuku's throat before he could stop them. You're destroying everything. Everyone. Doesn't it hurt? Doesn't all this hatred hurt you? Shigaraki's grin widened, the skin around his mouth cracking. Hurt? No, little hero. This is relief. This is the itch finally going away. He threw Izuku. It wasn't a technique. It was raw power. Izuku flew backward, crashing through a suspended bridge of rubble. He gasped, air fleeing his lungs, but forced himself to recover, spinning in midair to land on a jagged pillar. Midoriya! Gran Torino flashed past him, a blur of yellow and white. Don't engage him in conversation. He is not a man anymore. He is a vessel for all for one. I know! Izuku shouted back, launching himself again. I know, but he's still in there. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, though it was likely only minutes. Endeavor was relentless, burning his own body to keep the pressure up. Ryukyu, in dragon form, tried to pin Shigaraki, only to be tossed aside like a ragdoll. The heroes were throwing everything they had at a singular point, and it wasn't enough. Shigaraki was adapting. He was getting faster. The regeneration, though slowed by the constant damage, was keeping him in the fight. He's aiming for Aizawa. Bakugo screamed, blasting himself toward the teacher to provide cover. Shigaraki had changed tactics. He stopped engaging the brawlers. He crouched, the concrete beneath him pulverizing into sand just from the tension in his legs. He was going to jump. He was going to bypass the heavy hitters and take out the erasure. No, you don't! Izuku activated FA gene unknowingly, a subconscious accumulation of kinetic energy. He didn't know the name of the quirk yet, he just knew he needed more. He burst forward, outpacing sound. He intercepted Shigaraki's trajectory just as the villain leaped. They collided in midair, a tangle of limbs and desperation. They crashed into the remains of a shopping center, tumbling through floors of concrete and rebar. Izuku ended up on top, pinning Shigaraki's arms with Black Whip, his fist cocked back, glowing with 100% of one for all. This was it. The opening. Shigaraki was winded, his regeneration lagging for a split second. A direct hit to the head now would knock him unconscious, maybe even end it. The vestiges roared in Izuku's mind. Strike him. End this. Izuku looked down. The dust had settled for a microsecond. Shigaraki wasn't looking at Izuku. He was looking past him, at the sky. And for that fraction of a second, the manic grin was gone. His eyes were wide, wet, and incredibly young. The image of the crying child overlaid reality. Izuku didn't see the monster who had decayed a city. He saw Tenko Shimura, wandering the streets alone, terrified of his own hands. If I hit him now, I kill him. The thought was a spike of ice in Izuku's brain. Heroes saved people. All Might saved people. If he killed Shigaraki, did All for One win? Did the cycle of hatred just continue? I can save you! Izuku screamed, his voice breaking. His fist, charged with the power to level a mountain, faltered. The lightning crackling around his arm dimmed. He didn't punch through Shigaraki's skull. He opened his hand. He reached out, not to strike, but to grab. To pull the boy out of the darkness. Let me help you. The silence of that moment stretched into eternity. Shigaraki's gaze snapped back to Izuku. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, predatory confusion, followed instantly by contempt. You heroes! Shigaraki whispered, his voice raspy and amused. You're so arrogant. The hesitation cost everything. Shigaraki didn't need a quirk to capitalize on mercy. He drove his knee up into Izuku's stomach. The breath left Izuku's body in a wet gag. The force was enough to rupture organs. His grip on Black Whip faltered. The tendrils dissipated into black smoke. Shigaraki threw him off. As Izuku tumbled backward, gasping for air that wouldn't come, Shigaraki stood up. He reached into his pocket, a movement so casual it was insulting, and pulled out a small, high-density projectile. A quirk erasing bullet? No. Just a piece of debris? No. He simply picked up a jagged piece of rebar. You hesitated, Shigaraki said. Gran Torino told me you were the next symbol. But a symbol doesn't blink. Shigaraki hurled the rebar. Not at Izuku. He threw it at Aizawa. The distance was over 200 meters. The accuracy was superhuman. Sensei! Izuku screamed, scrambling to his feet, ignoring the agony in his abdomen. Bakugo saw it. He was closer to Aizawa. He moved to intercept, but he was a fraction of a second too slow. Ryukyu tried to block it with her wing, but the projectile was too small, too fast. It struck Aizawa in the leg. Not a lethal blow, but the shock of the impact, the sudden shattering of his femur, forced a physical reaction. Aizawa flinched. His eyes scrunched shut for a single, agonizing heartbeat. Erasure deactivated. The world seemed to inhale. The red lines on Shigaraki's body flared, but this time, they weren't just physical veins. The air around him turned gray. The ground beneath his feet turned to dust instantly. Checkmate, Shigaraki laughed. It was a sound like grinding glass. A wave of decay erupted from him. It wasn't the slow creep from before. It was a tsunami. The building they were standing on disintegrated. The shockwave of rot spread outward in a radial blast. Jump! Endeavor screamed, grabbing the nearest heroes and blasting upward. But Gran Torino was close. He had been moving in to support Izuku when the hesitation happened. Now, he was in the kill zone. Sorahiko! Nana's voice screamed in Izuku's head. Izuku watched, helpless, paralyzed by the sudden shift in momentum. Gran Torino was fast, but decay was omnidirectional. The old hero tried to kick off a wall to gain altitude, but the wall turned to ash under his boot. He slipped. Shigaraki was there in an instant. The villain didn't use decay on him. He didn't want him to disappear. He wanted to send a message. Shigaraki's hand closed around Gran Torino's throat. You were always too fast for your own good, old man, Shigaraki sneered. DKU. Move! Bakugo's scream tore through the air, but Izuku couldn't. He was frozen. He was watching the consequences of his mercy unfold in high definition. Shigaraki slammed Gran Torino into the ground. A sickening crunch echoed across the battlefield, louder than the crumbling buildings. It wasn't just bone breaking. It was the sound of a life ending. Gran Torino's chest caved in under the villain's strength. Blood erupted from the old hero's mouth, splattering across Shigaraki's face. Gran Torino didn't move again. No! Izuku's wail was primal. It scraped his throat raw. The grief was instantly replaced by terror as Shigaraki turned his eyes back to Izuku. The villain was bathed in blood and dust, standing over the corpse of the man who had taught All Might, the man who had taught Izuku how to move. One down, Shigaraki said softly. Now, give it to me. He lunged. Without erasure, Shigaraki was a god. He closed the distance to Izuku instantly. Izuku tried to bring his arms up, tried to summon 100%, but his mind was fractured. The image of Gran Torino's body was burned into his retinas. His coordination was gone. Shigaraki's hand, all 5 fingers outstretched, reached for Izuku's face. If he touches me, I die. If he touches me, he takes one for all. A blur of orange and green crashed into the scene. Die. Katsuki Bakugo did not hesitate. He never hesitated. He used a stun grenade point blank in Shigaraki's face, blinding the villain for a millisecond. Bakugo didn't retreat. He grabbed Izuku by the collar and hurled him backward, away from the danger. Get out of here, you damn nerd! But shoving Izuku meant Bakugo was occupying the space Izuku had just vacated. Shigaraki, blinded and enraged, lashed out blindly. His hand, glowing with the dark energy of All for One and the corrosive power of decay, clamped onto Bakugo's right shoulder. Time stopped again. Izuku, tumbling through the air, watched. He saw Bakugo's eyes. They weren't fearful. They were resigned. They were the eyes of someone paying the bill for someone else's mistake. Kaken! The decay took hold instantly. Bakugo's gauntlet disintegrated. The skin of his arm turned gray and flaked away, revealing muscle, then bone, then nothing. But Shigaraki wasn't just decaying him. He was trying to steal a quirk, thinking he had grabbed Izuku. Realizing his mistake, Shigaraki roared in frustration and clenched his fist. He crushed what was left of Bakugo's shoulder. Bakugo didn't scream. He grunted, a short, sharp sound of absolute shock. The force of the grip pulverized his collarbone and scapula. Shigaraki ripped his hand back, tearing away a chunk of flesh and bone, flinging Bakugo aside like a broken toy. Bakugo hit the ground and rolled, leaving a trail of blood and ash. He didn't get up. Wrong one, Shigaraki hissed, rubbing his eyes. Useless side characters. Izuku hit the ground, rolling to a stop near Bakugo's unmoving body. The smell was unbearable. Seared meat and rot. Kaken. Izuku crawled over. Kaken, please. Bakugo's right side was a crater. His arm was gone from the shoulder down. His chest was heaving with shallow, ragged breaths. His eyes were open, glazed, staring at the gray sky. You! Bakugo rasped, blood bubbling between his teeth. You stopped. The accusation hit Izuku harder than any punch. You stopped. You hesitated. And look, I'm sorry, Izuku sobbed, his hands hovering over the wound, terrified to touch him. I'm so sorry, little brother. The voice of All for One boomed, not from the sky, but from Shigaraki's mouth. The villain was walking toward them, slow, inevitable. It seems my vessel is breaking down, but I have enough time for this. Shigaraki raised his hand. Rivulets of black and red lightning arced from his fingers. The tendrils of All for One, Endeavor and Todoroki were rushing in from the flank, but they were too far. Aizawa was down. Gran Torino was dead. Bakugo was dying. Izuku stood up. His legs felt like lead. His vision was blurring with tears. I have to fight. I have to kill him, but the fire was gone. The righteous fury that usually fueled One for All was replaced by a cold, hollow void of guilt. He tried to summon the power. He tried to call upon the stockpile. One for All 100%. The lightning flickered around him, weak and sputtering. The vestiges were silent. They were recoiling from his mental state. They were reacting to the massive dissonance in his heart. Shigaraki was in front of him. You're not worthy, Shigaraki said. He didn't strike Izuku. He placed his hand gently on Izuku's chest. It wasn't decay. It was the feeling of something being ripped out of his soul. No! Izuku screamed, clutching at Shigaraki's wrist. The world turned white. Inside the vestige world, the realm of One for All was usually a place of auroras and mist. Now it was a storm. Izuku stood on the precipice, watching as a tidal wave of darkness, Shigaraki and All for One, crashed against the golden light of the vestiges. First user Yoichi stood at the front. You cannot have it. It is mine by right. All for One's voice thundered. My brother, look at your holder. He is broken. He is weak. He cannot make the hard choices. He is not a hero. He is a child playing dress-up. Izuku fell to his knees in the mindscape. He's right. I got Gran Torino killed. I got Kaken hurt. I failed. The doubt was the crack in the armor. The darkness seeped through the cracks. It wrapped around the vestiges. It didn't consume them entirely. The will of One for All was too ancient, too stubborn to be taken instantly, but it tore at them. Shigaraki's avatar lunged, grabbing the misty forms of the users. He ripped. A scream echoed through the void, not just Izuku's, but the screams of Nana, of Banjo, of An. The connection snapped. Reality. Izuku was blasted backward, as if shot out of a cannon. He slammed into the remains of a wall, sliding down into the dust. Shigaraki staggered back, clutching his own chest. He coughed, vomiting a mixture of blood and black sludge. His body was failing. The procedure was incomplete, and the strain of forcing the quirk theft was tearing him apart. It resists, Shigaraki snarled, looking at his hand. The red lines on his skin were receding, turning dull. I didn't get it all. Just scraps. He looked at Izuku. Izuku lay slumped against the wall. His eyes were open, but they were empty. The green lightning was gone. The feeling of the stockpile, the warm hum of power that had been his constant companion for a year, was silent. It wasn't just that he couldn't use it. It felt like the phone line had been cut. He reached out for Black Whip, and found nothing. He reached for Float, and found gravity pulling him down. He reached for the strength, and found only his own exhausted, quirkless muscles. Retreat, a voice said from a small radio on Shigaraki's belt. It was a near Hien Nomu, speaking on behalf of the main body. Master, body breaking. Gigantomachia's massive hand crashed through the smoke, scooping Shigaraki up. The giant had arrived, plowing through the remaining heroes like a natural disaster. Deku. Shigaraki whispered as he was lifted into the air, his body steaming. Next time, don't blink. The villains retreated. The dust swirled. The noise of battle faded into the groans of the dying and the weeping of the survivors. Izuku sat there. He didn't move. He couldn't feel his legs. 10 meters away, medics were swarming over Bakugo. We're losing him. Get a tourniquet. Cauterize the wound. Gran Torino is DOA. I repeat, Gran Torino is confirmed dead. Eraserhead is down. We need a evac now. The voices were sharp, professional, panicked. Izuku looked at his hands. They were covered in dust and dried blood. They were shaking violently. I tried to save him, Izuku thought, the thought looping like a broken record. I saw the crying child. I tried to save him. He looked at Gran Torino's crushed body, barely visible through the settling dust. And this is what it cost. A shadow fell over him. Izuku looked up. Endeavor stood there. The flame hero was battered, his costume in tatters, one eye swollen shut. He looked down at Izuku, then at the retreating form of Gigantomachia, then back at the boy. Endeavor didn't scold him. He didn't yell. He looked at Izuku with something worse than anger. He looked at him with pity. Midoriya, Endeavor rumbled, his voice rough. Can you stand? Izuku tried. He pushed against the ground. But his arms trembled and gave out. He collapsed face first into the dirt. Izuku whispered into the ash. I can't feel it. Feel what? One for all, Izuku choked out, the tears finally cutting tracks through the grime on his face. It's quiet. It's gone. Endeavor stiffened. He took it? I don't know, Izuku sobbed, curling into a ball. I don't know. But they're gone. I'm alone. The rain began to fall then. It wasn't a cleansing rain. It was a black rain, mixing with the ash and smoke, turning the world into a slurry of mud. It fell on the ruins of Jaku City. It fell on the body of the old veteran who had fought for peace. It fell on the mutilated form of the boy who had wanted to win, and it fell on Izuku Midoriya, the boy who had tried to save everyone, and in doing so, had saved no one. He closed his eyes, wishing he could just disappear into the mud. But the silence in his head was the loudest thing he had ever heard. The ghosts were gone, and for the first time since he met All Might on that beach, Izuku Midoriya was truly, terrifyingly, quirkless again. The first thing Izuku Midoriya noticed was the silence. It wasn't the quiet of a library, or the hush of a classroom during a test. It was a heavy, sterilized silence, the kind that swallows sound and presses against the eardrums. It smelled of antiseptic, floor wax, and the stale, recycled air of a climate control system working overtime. He stared at the ceiling. White tiles. A slight water stain in the corner of one square. A fluorescent light humming at a frequency that felt like it was drilling into his teeth. He didn't know how long he had been staring at it. Hours? Days? Time felt viscous, like wading through syrup. Slowly, the memories leaked back in. Not in a rush, but in jagged, painful flashes. The dust. The gray sky. The crunch of bone. The look in Shigaraki's eyes, not the monster, but the child. The hesitation. Izuku's breath hitched. His heart monitor spiked, the steady beep 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 accelerating into a frantic rhythm. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the image of Gran Torino's chest caving in, but the image was burned onto the back of his eyelids. He instinctively reached for one for all. He needed the reassurance, the hum of the power stockpile, the presence of the vestiges. He needed to hear Nana's voice, or the first calm reassurance. He needed to feel the energy that had been his constant companion, his burden, and his lifeline for over a year. He reached inside his chest, searching for the flame. There was nothing. It wasn't just that the fire was out, it felt as though the fireplace itself had been bricked up. The connection was severed. Where there used to be a roaring sun of power, there was now a cold, gaping void. A hollow space that echoed with his own terror. It's gone. The thought was so terrifying he couldn't even vocalize it. He tried to sit up, gasping, but his body screamed in protest. Every inch of him felt bruised. His limbs were heavy, leaden. Izuku? The voice was soft, trembling, and terrified. Izuku turned his head. Sitting in a chair beside the bed, looking smaller and more fragile than he had ever seen her, was his mother. Inko Midoriya's eyes were swollen red, dark circles bruising the skin beneath them. She was clutching a handkerchief so tightly her knuckles were white. Mom? His voice was a wreck, dry, scratchy, barely a whisper. Inko let out a sob that sounded like something breaking. She surged forward, burying her face in the mattress beside his hand, terrified to hug him and hurt him further. Oh, thank God. Thank God, thank God. You're awake. You're finally awake. Izuku looked at her trembling shoulders. He wanted to comfort her. He wanted to say, "It's okay, I'm here, I'm the hero." But the words died in his throat. He wasn't a hero. Not anymore. How long? He rasped. Inko lifted her head, wiping her eyes. 2 weeks, Izuku. You've been in a coma for 2 weeks. The doctors, they said your body was exhausted beyond anything they'd ever seen. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, quirk exhaustion. The irony tasted like bile. Where are we? Central Hospital, Inko said, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if afraid the walls were listening. Tokyo. They moved everyone here. It's one of the few places that's still secure. Still secure. The implication of those 2 words hit Izuku harder than a punch from All Might. The war, Izuku said, staring back at the ceiling. What happened? Inko hesitated. She looked away, biting her lip. She didn't want to tell him. She wanted to wrap him in a blanket and take him home, to pretend the world outside wasn't burning. But she knew her son. She knew he wouldn't stop asking. It's not good, Izuku, she whispered. Shigaraki escaped. Makia escaped. A lot of the villains, they got away. And the cities. She trailed off, unable to finish. She didn't have to. Izuku knew. He remembered the wave of decay. He remembered the feeling of society crumbling around him. And Gran Torino? He asked, though he already knew the answer. He just needed to hear it spoken aloud, to make it real, to punish himself with the truth. Inko flinched. She squeezed his hand, her grip desperate. He didn't make it, honey. I'm so sorry. Izuku didn't cry. He felt like he should. He felt like he should be wailing, screaming, tearing the sheets. But he felt nothing but a cold, heavy stone in his gut. The tears wouldn't come. He was too hollow for tears. And Kaken? Inko's face crumbled. She looked down at her lap. He's alive. He's here, in the ward. He's had 3 surgeries. Is he okay? He lost his arm, Izuku, Inko whispered, the horror of it plain in her voice. His right arm. From the shoulder. The doctors, they couldn't save it. The silence returned, heavier than before. It pressed down on Izuku's chest, suffocating him. I did that, the voice in his head whispered. It sounded like his own voice, but twisted, malicious. I hesitated. I tried to talk. And because of me, Gran Torino is dead. Because of me, Kaken is crippled. Because of me, Shigaraki is free. I need to be alone, Izuku said. Izuku, no, I just got you back. Please, Mom, he said, turning his head away from her, staring at the wall. Please. Just a little while. Inko looked at him, her heart breaking all over again. She saw the dead look in his eyes, the look of a soldier who had returned from war in body, but not in spirit. She stood up shakily, kissed his forehead, he didn't react, and walked to the door. I'll be right outside, she promised. I love you, Izuku. The door clicked shut. Izuku lay in the silence. He tried again. He closed his eyes and focused everything he had on the core of his being. One for all. Please. Just a spark. Just a flicker. Nothing. Just the empty dark. The connection was dead. Shigaraki had taken it. Or maybe the vestiges had left him. Maybe they had seen his failure, his weakness, and abandoned him. I'm sorry, he whispered to the empty room. I'm so sorry. The days began to bleed together. The hospital was a fortress, but cracks were showing in the walls. Izuku could hear it. He heard the nurses whispering in the hallways when they thought he was asleep. Did you see the news? Another prison break in Hokkaido. My sister said the heroes in her district just quit. Handed in their licenses and left. They said it's not worth dying for people who hate them. We're running low on painkillers again. Logistics are a nightmare. Society wasn't just stumbling, it was free-falling. The bedrock of faith that All Might had built for decades had been pulverized in a single afternoon. The villains weren't just winning battles, they had won the narrative. The heroes had failed. Izuku lay in his bed, a ghost haunting his own body. He ate when they told him to eat. He slept when the exhaustion took him. Physical therapy began on the third day. He moved through the motions like a marionette with cut strings. His body was healing, scars forming over the lacerations, bones knitting together, but his movements were sluggish. Without the subconscious support of One for All, his body felt heavy, alien. He was just a boy again. A quirkless, broken boy. On the fifth day, the door opened, and the visitor wasn't a nurse or his mother. It was All Might. Toshinori Yagi looked like a skeleton draped in oversized clothes. He had always been thin in his true form, but now he looked translucent. His cheeks were sunken, his eyes deep pools of shadow. He leaned heavily on a cane, his movements brittle. He closed the door and stood there for a moment, looking at Izuku. Izuku was sitting up in bed, staring out the window at the gray, rainy skyline of Tokyo. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. Young Midoriya, All Might said softly. The name made Izuku flinch. Don't, Izuku whispered. Don't call me that. All Might sighed, a sound that rattled in his chest. He walked over and sat in the chair Inko usually occupied. He placed his cane against the nightstand. How are you feeling? Like I should be dead, Izuku said flatly. He finally turned to look at his mentor. Gran Torino is dead. You know that, right? All Might flinched. I know. He died because of me. No, All Might said firmly, though his voice lacked its usual strength. He died because of Shigaraki. He died fighting a war, Izuku. I hesitated. The confession hung in the air between them. The elephant in the room. The moment that changed history. I had him, Izuku said, his voice trembling, tears finally pricking at the corners of his eyes. I had him pinned. I had 100% ready. I could have ended it. I could have smashed his skull in, but I looked at him, and I saw a crying kid. And I stopped. I tried to save him. Izuku grabbed the bedsheets, his knuckles turning white. And because I stopped, he killed Gran Torino. Because I stopped, he took Kaken's arm. Because I stopped, he got away. He looked at All Might, begging for judgment. Begging for All Might to yell at him, to tell him he was a failure, to take the quirk back if it was even there to take. I'm sorry, Izuku choked out. I lost it. One for all, it's gone. I can't feel it anymore. Shigaraki touched me. He took it. I lost your quirk. I lost everything you gave me. All Might stared at him. His blue eyes were filled with an infinite, crushing sadness. But not anger. Never anger. He reached out and placed a large, bony hand over Izuku's fist. You didn't lose it because you're weak, Izuku, All Might said quietly. You hesitated because you have the heart of a hero. A true hero saves not just the body, but the soul. You saw someone in pain, and you reached out. That is what I chose you for. That heart got people killed. Izuku snapped, pulling his hand away. That heart is a liability. If I had just been a soldier, if I had just done what I was supposed to do, then you wouldn't be you, All Might said. And perhaps the world doesn't need a soldier. Perhaps it needs something more. But right now, the cost is heavy. I know. You don't know, Izuku whispered. You won. You always won. I lost. All Might looked down at his own hands. Hands that could no longer make a fist. Hands that had dropped the baton of peace. I am here, sitting in a chair, powerless, while my master lies in the morgue and my student lies in a hospital bed, broken by the burden I placed on his shoulders. Do you think I feel like a winner, young Midoriya? Izuku looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the guilt mirroring his own. All Might blamed himself for choosing Izuku, for not preparing him enough, for Shigaraki's existence, for everything. We are both just echoes right now, All Might whispered. But you are alive. And as long as you are alive, it is not over. It feels over, Izuku said. It feels like the end of the world. It is the end of a world, All Might corrected. The age of heroes, the age I built, it has collapsed. But you are still here. I have no power, Izuku said, clutching his chest. It's gone. I'm empty. All Might looked at Izuku's chest. One for all is a mystery, even to me. But even if it is gone, truly gone, you are still Izuku Midoriya. You were a hero before you ate that hair. Do not forget that. But the words felt hollow to Izuku. Hero? I was a dreamer. And look where dreaming got us. All Might stayed for an hour. They sat mostly in silence. When All Might left, he looked even older than when he had arrived. A week passed. Izuku regained the ability to walk. He did laps around his room. Then laps around the ward. He was dressed in hospital pajamas, his feet in slippers. He looked like any other patient, except for the scars that mapped his arms, the old ones from his 100% smashes, and the fresh, pink ones from the war. The hospital was filled with the wounded. Pro-heroes, sidekicks, police officers, civilians caught in the crossfire. Izuku kept his head down, pulling his hair over his eyes. He didn't want to be recognized. He felt like a contagion. He saw his classmates from a distance. He saw Ida, his arm in a sling, talking to a doctor with stiff, frantic gestures. He saw Uraraka sitting on a bench in the hallway, staring at the floor, her face devoid of its usual bubbly light. She looked traumatized. He saw Kurishima, wrapped in bandages, trying to cheer up a crying Sato. Izuku hid in a supply closet until they passed. He couldn't face them. What could he say? Sorry I failed? Sorry we lost? They would tell him it wasn't his fault. They would try to comfort him. And that would be unbearable. He didn't deserve their comfort. He deserved their hate. But there was one person he couldn't avoid. One person he had to see. It took him 2 days to work up the courage. He asked the nurse where Katsuki Bakugo's room was. The nurse looked at him with pity, everyone looked at him with pity, and gave him the room number. 402. It was on the floor above him. The walk to the elevator felt like walking to the gallows. The elevator ride was an eternity. The hallway on the 4th floor was quiet. Izuku stood outside room 402 for 10 minutes. His hand hovered over the door handle. He was shaking. He was terrified of what he would find on the other side. Was Bakugo awake? Was he angry? He has every right to kill me, Izuku thought. He took a bullet for me. He took a quirk for me. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and pushed the door open. The room was dim. The blinds were drawn, letting in only thin slivers of gray afternoon light. Bakugo was sitting up in bed. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking out the window, or at the blinds covering it. He was wearing a hospital gown. His left arm was resting on his lap. His right sleeve was pinned flat against his shoulder. The sight of it punched the air out of Izuku's lungs. It was real. It wasn't a nightmare. The explosive, dynamic, unstoppable force that was Katsuki Bakugo had been maimed. Bakugo didn't turn his head. He knew who it was. He had probably heard Izuku's distinctive, hesitant footsteps outside the door. Kaken, Izuku whispered. Silence. Get out, Bakugo said. His voice was low, raspy, lacking its usual fire. It sounded tired. Izuku stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. I had to see you. I had to. I said get out, Deku. I'm sorry, Izuku blurted out, the dam breaking. He bowed his head, his hands clenching at his sides. I'm so sorry, Kaken. It's my fault. You jumped in because I froze. I hesitated. And you... Shut up, Bakugo snapped. He finally turned his head. Izuku flinched. He expected rage. He expected the red eyes to be burning with hatred. But they weren't. Bakugo's eyes were dull. There was anger there, yes, but it was buried under layers of shame. Don't you dare, Bakugo hissed, his voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Don't you dare stand there and take credit for my choices. But, I moved on my own. Bakugo's voice rose, cracking. My body moved on its own. Just like you back then with the sludge villain. I didn't think. I just did it. I chose to save your ass. And look what happened. Izuku gestured frantically at Bakugo's empty shoulder. You lost your arm. You can't. How are you going to be the #1 hero now? How are you going to use your quirk? I ruined your dream. Bakugo looked away, jaw clenched tight. My dream isn't dead. Don't write me off, you bastard. I'm not writing you off. I'm just... Izuku choked. I should have been faster. I should have just hit him. Why didn't I just hit him? Because you're you, Bakugo muttered. He looked down at his lap. You're always looking to save the villain. It makes me sick. I know, Izuku whispered. It made me weak. No, Bakugo said. The word was quiet, surprising Izuku. Bakugo looked back at him. It didn't make you weak. It made you careless. There's a difference. Bakugo shifted in the bed, grimacing as pain shot through his healing shoulder. I didn't save you because I like you. I saved you because you were carrying the torch. You were the one All Might chose. And if you died, then All Might's legacy died. He looked Izuku dead in the eye. So tell me, Deku. Do you still have it? The question hung in the air. Izuku looked down at his hands. No. Bakugo's eyes widened slightly. What? It's gone, Izuku said, his voice flat. Shigaraki touched me. After he threw you. He touched me. I can't feel it anymore. The vestiges are quiet. The power is gone. I'm quirkless again. Bakugo stared at him. For a long moment, the only sound was the humming of the medical equipment. Then Bakugo let out a harsh, bitter laugh. He threw his head back against the pillow, laughing at the ceiling. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of someone realizing the joke was on them. So I lost my arm for nothing, Bakugo said. The words were a knife in Izuku's heart. Kak and I, get out, Bakugo said again. This time, there was no heat in it. Just exhaustion. I can't look at you right now. Just go. Kaken, please, go! Bakugo roared, grabbing a plastic cup from his table and throwing it. It bounced harmlessly off the wall, water splashing onto the floor. Get out of my face! Leave me alone! Izuku fled. He ran out of the room, down the hall, ignoring the startled looks of a passing doctor. He ran until he reached the stairwell, and then he collapsed on the steps, burying his face in his knees. I lost my arm for nothing. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing his ribs. He was toxic. He was a plague. Everyone he got close to got hurt. All Might lost his power. Gran Torino lost his life. Bakugo lost his arm. His mother was living in constant terror. And now, Shigaraki was out there. All for One was out there. Izuku sat up, wiping his face. His eyes were dry now. The sadness had burned away, leaving only a cold, hard clarity. If One for All was gone, he was useless to the heroes. If One for All was not gone, if it was just dormant, or hidden, then he was a target. Shigaraki had said, next time, don't blink. He would come back. He would come for the rest of the power. He would come to finish the job. And if Izuku was at UA, Shigaraki would tear the school down. If Izuku was at home, Shigaraki would kill his mother. If Izuku was in this hospital, everyone here would die. The realization settled over him like a shroud. He couldn't stay. He wasn't a hero anymore. He was a beacon for death. The sun went down, casting long shadows across the hospital room. Inko had gone home for the night, urged by the nurses to get some real sleep. The hospital was quiet, the night shift settling in. Izuku sat at the small desk near the window. He had found a notepad and a pen. He wrote 3 letters. The first was to his mother. That was the hardest. His hand shook so much he had to stop and breathe. He told her he loved her. He told her he was sorry for being a bad son. He told her she had to stay safe. And the only way for her to be safe was for him to be gone. I'm sorry I couldn't be the hero you wanted. I'm sorry I always make you worry. Please don't look for me. The second was to Class 1A. He pictured their faces. Uraraka's smile. Ida's hand chops. Todoroki's quiet support. You guys are the real heroes. You can do what I couldn't. Please protect everyone. Please protect the people I let down. The third was to All Might. I failed you. I squandered the gift. I'm sorry I couldn't be the symbol of peace. I'm leaving because I can't let anyone else get hurt because of me. Don't look for me. Let me be the last failure of One for All. He folded the letters and placed them on the pillow of his bed. He went to the small closet in the room. His hero costume was destroyed, gone. But his civilian clothes were there. A pair of jeans, a t-shirt, a hoodie. And his shoes. The red high tops were battered, scuffed, and stained with mud and blood that hadn't fully washed out. The soles were worn thin. He put them on. They felt familiar. They felt like the only thing that still fit. He pulled the hood up over his unruly green hair. He opened the window. The night air was cold and smelled of rain. We drifted in from the city, sirens in the distance, the smell of smoke. The city was hurting. Izuku looked back at the room one last time. It looked sterile, empty. A place for healing, but he wasn't healed. He was just patched up. He climbed out onto the ledge. He was on the 3rd floor. Without One for All, the jump was dangerous. He would have to be careful. He would have to climb down the drain pipes like a common criminal. He grabbed the cold metal pipe and swung his legs over. He lowered himself down, hand over hand, his muscles straining. He hit the wet grass of the hospital courtyard with a soft thud, rolling to absorb the impact. He winced as his healing ribs protested, but he ignored the pain. He stayed in the shadows, moving along the perimeter wall. He avoided the security cameras, using the knowledge of surveillance he had picked up from his hero training. He reached the gate. It was locked, but there was a gap in the fence further down, damaged during the chaotic intake of patients days ago. He squeezed through. He stood on the sidewalk outside the hospital. The street lights flickered. The streets were empty. A curfew was in effect, but enforcement was spotty. Izuku turned and looked up at the massive building. He found the window of room 402. The light was off. "I'm sorry, Kaken," he whispered into the rain. "I'll make sure he never comes near you again." He turned his back on the hospital. He turned his back on Yue. He turned his back on the path he had walked for so long. He put his hands in his pockets, hunched his shoulders against the cold wind, and began to walk. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to keep moving. He was hunting demons now, his own, and the ones destroying his city. And he would do it alone. He vanished into the darkness of the ruined city, a ghost in red shoes. 2 months, 61 days since the sky fell in Jaka City. 61 days since the pillars of society cracked, buckled, and finally collapsed under the weight of a single man's hatred. Tokyo was no longer a metropolis, it was a carcass. The neon lights that used to paint the clouds in cyberpunk hues were mostly dead, shattered, or flickering with the dying gasps of a failing power grid. The towering skyscrapers, once symbols of economic might and heroic protection, were now tombstones, dark, hollowed out, their windows jagged teeth against the gloom. It rained constantly. It was a weeping, acidic rain that smelled of sulfur and wet ash, a reminder of the fires that had burned for weeks after the prison break. Down in the gutters of the Shinjuku ward, where the shadows were long and the law was a fairy tale told to frighten children, something moved. It wasn't a hero. Heroes were bright. Heroes wore colors. Heroes announced their presence with catchphrases and dazzling quirks. This thing was a shadow wrapped in filth. Izuku Midoriya crouched on the rusted gargoyle of a pre-Quirk-era building, overlooking an alleyway. He was unrecognizable. The green bunny-eared cowl was gone, replaced by a ragged hood pulled low over a metal mouth guard he had scavenged from a riot police supply cache. His hero's suit, once a vibrant teal, was stained a muddy brown-black, patched with duct tape and mismatched Kevlar plating. Around his neck, a yellow cape, Gran Torino's cape, hung in tatters. It was heavy, sodden with rain, a physical weight that dragged at his throat, choking him just enough to remind him to breathe. He was shivering. The cold had settled into his bones weeks ago, and hadn't left. He was hungry, too, a gnawing emptiness in his stomach that had long ago ceased to be a sharp pain and had become a dull, persistent ache. But the physical pain was a distraction. It was noise. He welcomed it because when the pain was loud, the silence in his chest was quieter. Sector 4 is quiet, he thought. The analysis ran automatically in his brain, a ghost of the tactical genius he used to be. Too quiet. The looters usually move supplies through here at 0200 hours. He adjusted the gauntlets on his arms. They weren't the Air Force gloves created by Hatsum. Those were long gone, shattered in a fight 3 weeks ago against a muscular-type villain. These were hodgepodge creations, reinforced impact bracers stripped from a defeated villain, wired with a crude taser mechanism he had rigged using car batteries. He was quirkless. He was alone. And he was hunting. A scream cut through the sound of the rain. It was high, terrified, and abruptly cut off. Izuku didn't think. He didn't hesitate. The last time he had hesitated, the world had ended. He launched himself from the ledge. He didn't float. He fell. Gravity, once a suggestion when he had float, was now an absolute law. He hit the fire escape below with a bone-jarring clang, his boots slipping on the wet metal. He scrambled, ignoring the protest of his knees, and vaulted over the railing, dropping into the alley below. He landed in a crouch, splashing into a puddle of oily water. 3 figures stood at the end of the alley, illuminated by the headlights of a rusted truck. "Please!" a man begged. He was on his knees, shielding a woman and a small girl behind him. "Take the food. Just let us go." "We're taking the food, old man," one of the figures laughed. He was huge, his skin covered in rocky protrusions. A mutant type. "But we need entertainment too. The boss gets bored." The second villain, a lanky man with fingers that elongated into sharp whips, stepped forward. "Make it quick, Rock. I hate the rain." The third was the driver, leaning against the truck, smoking a cigarette. He had a gun. A simple, old-fashioned kinetic firearm. Dangerous. Izuku analyzed the scene in a fraction of a second. Target 1, rock skin. High durability, slow speed. Likely weak points, eyes, joints. Target 2, whip fingers. Mid-range emitter/mutant. Fragile build. Target 3, gunman. Priority target. Resources: 3 smoke pellets. 2 flash grenades. 1 grappling hook compressed air, 3 shots left. Taser gauntlets 50% charge. Quirk none. Win condition: incapacitate gunman, blind rock skin, break whip fingers. Get the family out. Cost: high probability of injury. Acceptable. Izuku moved. He didn't scream smash. He didn't announce his presence. He pulled the pin on a smoke pellet and bowled it forward. Hisses. Gray smoke exploded into the alley, filling the narrow space instantly. "What the hell?" the gunman shouted, raising his weapon. Izuku was already moving through the smoke. He kept low, practically crawling, using the darkness. He reached the gunman first. The man was firing blindly into the fog. Bang! Bang! The muzzle flashes illuminated the smoke in strobe light bursts. Izuku surged upward from the ground. He swung the metal baton he kept strapped to his thigh, a telescopic steel rod. He aimed not for the head, but for the wrist. Crack! The gunman screamed, dropping the pistol. Izuku didn't stop. He spun, driving the heavy heel of his iron-soled boot into the man's kneecap. The joint gave way with a sickening pop. The man went down. One down. "Who's there?" Rockskin roared. He swung a massive arm blindly, smashing into the brick wall. Debris rained down. Izuku retreated into the smoke. His heart was hammering against his ribs, but it wasn't the thunderous rhythm of one for all. It was the frantic, desperate beat of a prey animal forcing itself to be a predator. "Over there!" Whipfingers yelled. He had heat vision goggles. Damn it! Didn't account for gear. A lash of hardened flesh sliced through the smoke, catching Izuku across the shoulder. The Kevlar held, but the force threw him off balance. He stumbled, hitting the wet asphalt. "I see him! Just a brat in a mask!" Whipfingers shouted. Another lash came down. Izuku rolled, the asphalt scraping his cheek. The whip cracked the pavement where his head had been a second ago. Izuku scrambled to his feet. He couldn't trade blows. He had to be smarter. He grabbed a flash grenade from his belt. "Close your eyes," he rasped, his voice rough from disuse. He threw it at Whipfinger's feet. Bang! A blinding white light seared the alley, turning the night into day for a split second. Whipfingers screamed, tearing the goggles off his face, clutching his eyes. "My eyes! It burns!" Izuku closed the distance. He tackled the lanky villain, using his momentum to drive him into the side of the truck. He didn't have super strength, but he knew anatomy. He jammed his taser gauntlet into the villain's neck and pulled the trigger. Blue electricity arced. The villain convulsed and went limp. 2 down. You little rat! The roar came from behind. The smoke was clearing. The rock-skinned villain charged. He was like a boulder rolling downhill, unstoppable and heavy. Izuku turned. He had no gadgets left for this. No tricks. I have to stop him. The family was still huddled against the wall, paralyzed by fear. If Izuku dodged, the villain would plow right into them. Don't dodge. Block. It was a suicidal thought. Without a quirk, blocking a mutant-type charge was madness. But the instinct was hardwired into his soul. Save them. Izuku planted his feet. He took a breath. For a microsecond, his mind reached for the stockpile. He reached for the red veins, the lightning, the power that could stop a train. 1 for all 20%. Detroit. He punched. His fist met the villain's rocky chest. There was no shockwave. No blast of wind. No scattering of clouds. There was only the wet crunch of Izuku's metacarpals shattering. Gah! Izuku cried out, the pain blinding him. The villain didn't even slow down. He barely flinched. Is that it? Rockskin laughed. That was a love tap, the villain backhanded him. It was a casual blow, but with the weight of stone behind it. It struck Izuku in the ribs. He felt them crack, 2, maybe 3. The air was forced out of his lungs. He flew across the alley, crashing into a dumpster, crumpling to the wet ground. The world swam. Black spots danced in his vision. He tasted copper. Get up, he told himself. Get up, Deku. You're not done. He tried to push himself up, but his right hand was useless, a mangled ruin of swelling flesh. His left side was on fire. The rock-skinned villain loomed over him, blocking out the dim streetlights. You play hero? The villain sneered, raising a fist the size of a cinder block. But you're just trash. Look at you. No quirk, no power. Just a bug splattered on a windshield. Izuku stared up at the fist. Is this it? A strange sense of calm washed over him. He wasn't afraid. He was tired. So incredibly tired. If I die here, at least I tried. At least I bought them a few seconds. Run, Izuku wheezed to the family, blood bubbling past his lips. Run. The villain's fist began to descend. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, All Might. The darkness rushed up to meet him, and then the darkness burned. A lance of blue fire, hotter than the surface of the sun, cut through the rain. It struck the rock-skinned villain in the chest, not piercing him, but hitting him with the force of a freight train composed of pure heat. Arg! The villain was blasted backward, tumbling end over end down the alleyway until he crashed into the rusted truck, unconscious before he hit the metal. The heat was intense. The puddles in the alley evaporated instantly into steam. The cold that had permeated Izuku's bones for months vanished, replaced by a searing dryness. Izuku blinked, his vision hazy. Steps approached. Heavy, metallic steps. Clank. 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 Through the steam, a figure emerged. He was massive, broad-shouldered, a titan of flame. But the flames weren't the roaring, arrogant inferno of the past. They were controlled, concentrated, and weary. Endeavor stood over him. The number 1 hero looked like he had aged 20 years in 2 months. His suit was scarred, the dark blue material scuffed and torn. His face, illuminated by the beard of flames, was gaunt. The scar over his eye seemed deeper, angrier. He looked less like a symbol of peace and more like a symbol of penance. Endeavor looked at the unconscious villains. Then he looked at the terrified family. Go, he barked at them. Get to the shelter in Roppongi. The patrol route is clear. The father scrambled up, bowing frantically. Thank you? Thank you, Endeavor. They grabbed the little girl and ran, disappearing into the night. Endeavor turned his gaze back to the heap of trash and rags by the dumpster. Izuku tried to shrink back. He pulled his hood down further. He didn't want to be seen. Not like this. Not by him. You have a death wish, Vigilante? Endeavor rumbled. His voice was gravel. Fighting a C-rank mutant with a telescopic baton? That's suicide. Izuku didn't answer. He clutched his broken hand to his chest, trying to control his breathing. Endeavor narrowed his eyes. He leaned closer, the blue flames casting harsh shadows on Izuku's masked face. I've heard rumors, Endeavor said, more to himself than to Izuku. A ghost in the wards. A quirkless brawler taking on fights he can't win. They say he wears yellow. Endeavor reached out. Izuku tried to scramble away, but his broken ribs flared, and he collapsed with a gasp of pain. Endeavor's large hand grabbed the front of Izuku's tactical vest, hauling him up effortlessly. He slammed him gently but firmly against the brick wall. Let me see, Endeavor commanded. He reached for the hood. Don't, Izuku rasped. It was the first word he had spoken. Endeavor froze. The voice. Even through the modulator, even broken by pain, he recognized it. Endeavor ripped the hood back. He pulled the metal mask down. The blue firelight illuminated a face that was a map of tragedy. Green hair, matted with grease and blood. Eyes that were sunken deep into their sockets, dark circles like bruises underneath. A scar running from his hairline to his ear. But it was the eyes that stopped Endeavor's heart. They were dull. Dead. The emerald spark was gone. Midoriya, Endeavor whispered. The name came out as an exhale of shock. Izuku couldn't look him in the eye. He looked at the ground, shame burning hotter than the flames. Let me go. We thought you were dead, Endeavor said, his grip tightening on the vest. Or worse. All Might, he's been looking. We've all been looking. Stop looking, Izuku said. Izuku Midoriya died in the hospital. I'm just debris. Don't give me that melodrama, Endeavor growled, though his voice lacked its usual bite. He looked at Izuku's hand, purple, swollen, misshapen. He looked at the blood soaking the side of his vest. You're hurt. Badly? I'm fine. You have broken ribs. A broken hand. Probably a concussion. You're malnourished. Endeavor's eyes scanned him with a hero's analytical gaze. You have no quirk factor reading. It's true, isn't it? It's gone. Yes, Izuku spat the word out. It's gone. I'm nothing. So let me go. You think being quirkless makes you nothing? Endeavor asked. After everything you've seen? You think that's what defines worth, in this world? Izuku laughed, a wet hacking sound. Yes. Look at me, Endeavor. I just tried to save a family, and I almost died because I couldn't punch hard enough. I'm a liability. If I go back, if Shigaraki knows I'm there, he'll come. He'll kill everyone to make sure the embers are out. Shigaraki is quiet, Endeavor said. He's recovering. Or plotting. But if you're out here alone, you're just meat for the wolves. I'd rather be meat than a burden. Endeavor stared at him. He saw the reflection of his own obsession, his own failures, twisted and mirrored in this boy. He saw Tuya in the desperation. He saw Shoto in the isolation. Your mother, Endeavor said softly. She cries every day. She sits by the window and waits. Izuku flinched as if struck. A tear cut a clean line through the dirt on his cheek. Don't. She thinks you ran away because you were ashamed, Endeavor pressed. She thinks you hate yourself. I do! Izuku screamed. The sudden outburst echoed in the alley. I do hate myself. I had the power. I had the one for all. And I threw it away because I wanted to be noble. I wanted to save a monster, and now Gran Torino is rotting in the ground and Kaken has one arm and the world is hell. I don't deserve to go home. I don't deserve her. He was sobbing now, his body shaking violently. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the agony of his injuries and his heart. Endeavor's flames dimmed. He let go of Izuku's vest. Izuku slid down the wall, curling into a ball in the mud. Endeavor looked down at him. The number one hero felt utterly powerless. He could incinerate a Heian Noma. He could hold up a collapsing building. But he didn't know how to fix a broken boy. He had broken his own children. He had no right to try and fix All Might's. You're not saving anyone out here, Midoriya, Endeavor said quietly. You're just committing suicide by villain. It's the only way I can balance the books, Izuku whispered. Endeavor reached into his belt pouch. He pulled out a small, high-density energy bar and a sealed medical spray canister. He dropped them in the mud next to Izuku. I can't force you to come back, Endeavor said. Not legally. The laws are fluid right now. And if I carry you back kicking and screaming, you'll just run again. He turned away, the steam swirling around his massive frame. But know this, Endeavor said, looking back over his shoulder. Punishing yourself doesn't bring the dead back. It just kills the living. You want to atone? Survive. Get up. And fight smart. Because if you die in a gutter, then Shigaraki wins. And Gran Torino died for nothing. Endeavor activated his flight thrusters. I patrol this sector every 3 nights. If I find your corpse next time, I'm the one who has to tell your mother. Don't make me do that. With a roar of fire, Endeavor shot up into the sky, disappearing into the low-hanging clouds. Izuku was left alone in the dark. He stared at the energy bar and the medical spray. He wanted to leave them. He wanted to curl up and let the cold take him. It would be so easy. Just sleep. Just stop hurting. Survive, Endeavor had said. Fight smart. Izuku reached out with his trembling, unbroken hand. He grabbed the spray. He hissed as he applied it to his ribs, the numbing agent taking the edge off the agony. He tore open the wrapper of the energy bar with his teeth and ate it ravenously, barely tasting the synthetic chocolate. He stood up. It took 3 tries. He looked at his broken hand. He would have to set it himself. He would have to splint it. He picked up his mask and shoved it back on. He pulled the hood up. He wasn't a hero. He was a ghost. But ghosts still had unfinished business. He didn't go back to the rooftops. He went underground. The Tokyo subway system was largely abandoned, a labyrinth of tunnels that stretched for miles beneath the ruined city. The deeper you went, the safer you were from the roving gangs, but the closer you were to the forgotten things. Izuku had a nest in an old maintenance closet near the abandoned Shinjuku Sanchome station. It was a concrete box, 4 meters by 4 meters. He stumbled in, locking the heavy iron door behind him. The room was lit by a single battery-powered camping lantern he had scavenged. The walls were covered in writing, charts, maps, timetables, sketches of villain movements, notes on Noma sightings. It was the interior of his mind, plastered onto the concrete. The mutterings of a madman. In the corner there was a pile of dirty blankets, his bed, a stash of canned food, a first aid kit. Izuku sat on the blankets. He took a roll of bandages and a straight piece of metal scrap. He bit down on a piece of leather to keep from screaming as he pulled his fingers straight. Snap! He gasped, sweat pouring down his face, mixing with the grime. He wrapped the hand tightly. It would heal crooked. He didn't care. He leaned back against the cold wall, pulling Gran Torino's cape around him like a shroud. He closed his eyes, and the hallucinations started. They always started when the adrenaline faded. Good job, kid, a voice sneered. Daigoro Banjo. The 5th user. Izuku opened his eyes. The room was empty. You really showed that C-rank trash, the voice continued in his head. Broke your hand on his chest. Pathetic. I gave you Black Whip and you can't even hold a baton. Shut up, Izuku whispered. You hesitated, another voice said. Nana Shimura. Her voice wasn't kind like it used to be. It was cold. Disappointed. You let Toshi down. You let Sora down. You let me down. I know, Izuku said to the empty air. I know, you're empty, the first user's voice echoed. A vessel with a hole in the bottom. We poured everything into you, and you let it drain out. Izuku clutched his head with his good hand. Stop it! Leave me alone! But they weren't real. He knew that. The connection was gone. These weren't the vestiges. This was just his own brain, fracturing under the stress, using their voices to torture him. It was his guilt, wearing the faces of his heroes. He looked at the lantern flickering in the corner. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled photo. It was a picture taken at the UA Cultural Festival. Class 1A. Everyone was smiling. He was smiling. Eri was smiling. It looked like it was taken 100 years ago. He traced his thumb over Bakugo's face. Then All Might's. Then his own. I'm not trying to save people, Izuku whispered to the photo. The realization he had been suppressing finally bubbled to the surface. He thought back to the alley. Standing in front of the giant fist. He hadn't been thinking about a strategy to win. He had been waiting for the blow. I'm not trying to be a hero, he confessed to the silence. I'm trying to die doing something good. I'm trying to balance the ledger so I can stop existing. It was a terrifying thought. But it was the truth. He was throwing himself into the meat grinder, hoping the machine would eventually jam on his bones. He put the photo away. He looked at his gear. The grapple gun was empty. The taser was dead. His armor was compromised. If he went out tomorrow like this, he would die. And he wouldn't save anyone. Fight smart, Endeavor had said. Izuku looked at the wall of notes. He looked at the map of a nearby support item warehouse that had been looted, but maybe not fully cleared. He stood up. He walked over to the wall. He picked up a piece of charcoal. He drew a new diagram. Not a punch. Not a kick. A trap. A snare. If he had no power, he had to be the environment. He had to be the shadow. He had to be the fear. He wasn't All Might. He wasn't the symbol of peace. He looked at his reflection in the dark glass of the lantern. A hollow, scarred, dirty face stared back. I'm just Deku, he whispered. And Deku means useless. But then, a flicker of memory. Uraraka's voice. Deku sounds like you can do it. He clenched his good fist. No, he corrected himself. It means defenseless Izuku. But it's the name of a hero. He blew out the lantern. In the darkness, he didn't sleep. He planned. The ghosts screamed in his head, but for the first time in 2 months, he let them scream. He had work to do. Tomorrow, he would need more smoke bombs. The subway station was a tomb buried beneath the rotting corpse of Tokyo. It was the Marunouchi line, specifically a maintenance spur near the ruins of the Diet building. The air down here was heavy, pressing against the lungs with a weight that felt like deep water. It smelled of stagnant sewage, oxidized iron, and the pervasive, sweet sick scent of mold. Izuku Midoriya sat in the center of the damp concrete floor, surrounded by the detritus of his survival. A flickering camping lantern, its batteries dying, cast long, dancing shadows against the curved walls. To an observer, the shadows might have looked just like shadows. But to Izuku, they were alive. He was trying to repair his right gauntlet. He held a soldering iron he had scavenged from a looting electronics store, heating it over the flame of a portable stove. His hands were shaking, not a little tremor, but a violent, rhythmic quaking that made fine motor control impossible. Steady, he told himself. Just hold it steady. You're going to burn yourself, a voice said. It was smooth, deep, and sounded like Daigoro banjo. Izuku didn't look up. He knew if he looked up, he would see the fifth user standing there. But he wouldn't look like the hero lariat. He would look like a corpse, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle, his eyes hollowed out. I didn't give you Black Whip so you could play mechanic in a sewer, the voice continued, dripping with disdain. I gave it to you to catch people. But you can't catch anything, can you? You have slippery fingers. Shut up, Izuku whispered, the soldering irons slipping and singing the skin of his thumb. He hissed, dropping the tool. Clumsy, a woman's voice sighed. Nana Shimura. Toshi always said you were clumsy? I thought it was charming. Now I see it's just incompetence. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. You aren't real. You're gone. Shigaraki cut the line. Did he? The first user's voice was a whisper right in his ear, cold breath on his neck. Or are we just hiding? Maybe we're disgusted. Maybe we're locked inside the room, and we changed the locks because we don't want you coming back in. Izuku grabbed the half-repaired gauntlet and threw it across the room. It clattered loudly against the tracks, the sound echoing down the tunnel like a gunshot. Leave me alone! He screamed. The echo died away. The silence returned, thicker than before. He opened his eyes. The room was empty. Just the damp walls. Just the darkness. He brought his knees to his chest, burying his face in his arms. He was losing his mind. He knew it. The isolation, the malnutrition, the sleep deprivation, it was a cocktail for psychosis. But the voices felt so real because they spoke the truths he was afraid to articulate. He was clumsy. He had failed. He was disgusting. He looked at his hands. They were scarred, calloused, and stained with grease and dried blood. These were not the hands of a successor. They were the hands of a scavenger. He missed the warmth. That was the hardest part. One for all hadn't just been power, it had been a presence. A low, comforting hum in the back of his mind. A sense that he was never truly alone, that 7 generations of heroes were standing behind him, holding him up when his legs got tired. Now, the silence inside him was a physical ache. It felt like his soul had been evicted, leaving only a hollow shell. He couldn't stay down here. The voices were louder in the quiet. He needed noise. He needed the rain. He needed violence to drown them out. He retrieved the gauntlet. He taped the loose wire down with duct tape. It would hold. It had to. He pulled on his mask. The metal respirator clamped over his jaw, filtering out the worst of the mold. He pulled the hood of his gray, stained hoodie up. He strapped the yellow cape around his shoulders. It was practically a rag now, frayed and muddy, but he refused to take it off. He climbed the maintenance ladder, rung by rung, ascending from hell back into purgatory. The surface world was weeping. A torrential downpour battered the ruins of Chiota Ward. The streets were rivers of black sludge. The few streetlights that still worked flickered erratically, casting strobe light glimpses of the devastation. Izuku moved along the rooftops. He didn't leap with the explosive power of full cowling anymore. He ran. He parkoured. He used the grappling hook gun, a crude, compressed-air device he had built from a nail gun and a winch, to swing across gaps that were too wide to jump. It was slow. It was heavy. Every movement cost him energy he didn't have. His muscles burned with lactic acid. His broken ribs, though healing, throbbed with every impact. But he kept moving. If he stopped, he had to think. If he thought, he saw Gran Torino's chest caving in. Sector 7, he noted, scanning the street below through a pair of cracked binoculars. Villain activity increased. The jailbreakers are getting bold. He saw a group of 4 men breaking into a fortified pharmacy. They were smashing the metal shutters with sledgehammers and quirks. One man had arms made of pistons, another was spitting acid. Izuku analyzed them instantly. Piston arms, high impact, low speed. Range, close combat. Acid spit, mid-range. Corrosive. Dangerous to gear. 2 lookouts. One has a mutation-enhanced ears. The other is armed with a pipe. He didn't have the power to overwhelm them. He had to use fear. He had to be a ghost. Izuku reached into his utility belt. He pulled out a glass jar filled with a mixture of flour and aluminum powder. A poor man's flashbang fuel. He dropped it from the roof. It shattered on the pavement between the villains. A white cloud puffed up. What the? Izuku triggered a small igniter he had thrown with it. Whoosh! A fireball erupted, not lethal, but bright and hot. The villains scrambled back, shouting. Izuku dropped into the chaos. He didn't land in a hero pose. He landed on the lookout with the pipe, driving his knees into the man's shoulders, sending him crumbling to the ground. The piston man turned, swinging a massive metal fist. Izuku didn't block. He ducked, sliding under the blow on the slick pavement. He used the momentum to sweep the man's legs with his iron-soled boot. Piston Man fell heavily. It's the vigilante! The acid spitter screamed. Kill him! A glob of green slime shot toward Izuku. Izuku rolled. The acid hit the asphalt where he had been, hissing and eating through the stone. A drop splashed onto his cape, burning a hole through the yellow fabric. Izuku scrambled up, pulling a canister from his belt. It was a fire extinguisher he had stolen from a bus. He sprayed it directly into the acid spitter's face. The villain choked on the white powder, blinded. Izuku closed the distance. He swung his baton, striking the villain's solar plexus. The man folded. It was messy. It was desperate. It wasn't the clean, precise takedowns of a UA student. It was a bar brawl. The piston man was back up. He roared, his hydraulic arms pumping. He charged. Izuku had nowhere to dodge. He was backed against the pharmacy's shutters. I can't overpower him. He saw a loose piece of rebar sticking out of the rubble to his right. As the piston man punched, Izuku threw himself sideways at the last second. The piston punched a hole in the metal shutter. The villain's arm was stuck for a fraction of a second. Izuku grabbed the rebar. He didn't hit the villain. He jammed the metal rod into the exposed gears of the piston arm. The villain yanked his arm back. The gears ground against the rebar. Sparks flew. The mechanism seized with a screech of tearing metal. My arm! The villain howled. Izuku kicked him in the knee, then delivered a swift, brutal strike to the temple with the handle of his grapple gun. The villain went down hard. Silence returned to the street, save for the groans of the defeated men. Izuku stood there, chest heaving. He was covered in mud, soot, and extinguisher powder. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead where a piece of debris had clipped him. He looked at the villains. He should tie them up. He should call the police if the police even responded in this sector anymore. But he felt unsatisfied. He looked at his hands. They were shaking again. Is that it? He whispered. I'm still standing. He felt a perverse desire for the piston man to get back up. He wanted the fight to continue. He wanted to be pushed until he couldn't stand up. He wanted to be broken, because being broken felt like fair payment for his sins. You're pathetic, the voice of Bakugo, not the real one, but the ghost in his head, sneered. Looking for a beating because you're too cowardly to finish the job yourself. Izuku turned away from the unconscious villains. He left them for the rain. He walked down the street, limping slightly. The adrenaline was fading, and the cold was creeping back in. He turned a corner into a narrow alleyway, intending to grapple back up to the roofs. He stopped. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. Not from cold. From instinct. The alley was dark, but there was a presence there. A killing intent so sharp it felt like a razor blade pressed against his eyeball. You fight like a beast caught in a trap, a voice rasped from the shadows. Izuku froze. He knew that voice. Every hero student knew that voice. It was the voice of a nightmare. A figure detached itself from the darkness atop a dumpster. He wore ragged, blood-red bandages. A tattered scarf floated in the wind, defying gravity. His eyes were white slits of pure conviction. He held a jagged katana in one hand, the blade resting casually on his shoulder. The hero killer. Stain. Izuku's breath hitched. Stain. Stain tilted his head. His nose, or lack thereof, twitched as he scented the air. I know you. The boy from Hosu. The one who shouted about the essence of a hero. Stain hopped down. He landed silently, despite his heavy boots. He walked toward Izuku, his movements predatory and fluid. I watched you just now, Stain said. You took down 4 trash villains. Efficient enough. But, he stopped 5 meters away. He pointed the tip of his sword at Izuku's heart. There is no conviction in your fists. You aren't fighting to save. You aren't even fighting to win. Stain's eyes narrowed. You are fighting to die. Izuku stepped back. His hand drifted to his baton. I'm fighting to protect this city. I'm cleaning up the mess. Lies, Stain hissed. I can taste the rot on you, boy. You reek of self-pity. You wear the cape of a hero, but you walk with the slouch of a martyr. You don't know anything about me, Izuku snapped. You're a murderer. You belong in Tartarus. Tartarus is broken, Stain said, a twisted grin spreading across his face. Society is broken. The fakes have been winnowed out. Only the true remain. I came to see if you were true. All Might chose you. I respected that choice. Stain took a step forward. But looking at you now, I see a hollow shell. Where is the fire? Where is the smash? It's gone! Izuku shouted. The words tore out of him. The power is gone. I lost it. I'm quirkless. Are you happy? The successor is a failure. He expected Stain to laugh. He expected Stain to attack. Stain just looked at him. His expression shifted from contempt to something colder. Disappointment. Quirks are tools, Stain said quietly. Conviction is the weapon. All Might was not a hero because he was strong. He was strong because he was a hero. If you think losing your power makes you a fake, then you never understood him at all. The words cut deeper than any knife. Shut up. Izuku pulled his grapple gun. He didn't aim for the roof. He aimed for Stain. He fired. The nail spike shot through the air. Stain didn't even blink. He deflected the spike with a casual flick of his katana. Clang. You want to die, boy? Stain asked, his voice dropping an octave. Then let me help you. Stain vanished. He was too fast. Even without one for all, Izuku had trained his eyes to track high-speed movements. But Stain moved with the erratic, terrifying speed of a fanatic. Izuku instinctively raised his reinforced gauntlet to block his neck. Shing! Sparks flew. Stain's sword bit into the metal plating, slicing halfway through the steel. The impact drove Izuku to his knees. Weak, Stain whispered in his ear. Izuku rolled forward, dropping a smoke pellet. Gray fog filled the alley. I have to get distance. I have to trap him. Izuku scrambled up a fire escape, his boots slipping on the wet metal. He reached the first landing and turned, bat and ready. Stain was already there. He was clinging to the brick wall like a spider, his knives dug into the mortar. He lunged. Izuku swung the baton. Stain caught it with his bare hand. He twisted, wrenching the weapon from Izuku's grip and tossing it into the darkness. Stain kicked Izuku in the chest. Izuku flew back, crashing through the rotting wood of a boarded-up window. He tumbled into an abandoned apartment, rolling across the dusty floorboards. He gasped for air, his ribs screaming in agony. He scrambled backward, looking for a weapon. A broken chair leg. Anything. Stain walked through the broken window, shaking the glass from his scarf. You run, Stain said. You use toys. Where is your spirit? Where is the boy who stood against me to save his friend? That boy had no chance of winning, but he struck with the intent of a god. You strike like a cornered rat. I failed them. Izuku screamed, backing into a corner. I hesitated. I tried to save Shigaraki, and because of me, people died. I don't deserve to have spirit. I deserve this. Stain stopped. He sheathed his sword. He pulled a smaller, serrated dagger from his vest. So that is it, Stain murmured. You are drowning in guilt. You think your life is a currency you can spend to buy forgiveness. He moved faster than thought. Izuku tried to bring his arms up. Stain slashed. A shallow cut across Izuku's cheek. Stain licked the blade. Blood cool. Izuku's body locked up instantly. He collapsed, hitting the floor hard. He couldn't move a finger. He couldn't blink. He could only breathe and stare up at the ceiling. Stain stood over him. The killer loomed like a gargoyle, his red eyes glowing in the gloom. You remind me of the fakes I purged, Stain said, crouching down. They fought for money. For fame. You fight for death. It is the same sickness. Selfishness. Stain placed the tip of the dagger against Izuku's throat. A single drop of blood welled up. A hero who seeks death saves no one, Stain growled. You think throwing your life away honors the dead? It insults them. The old man who died. Gran Torino, did he die so you could rot in a gutter? Did your friend lose his arms so you could become a suicide note? Izuku couldn't speak. But tears leaked from his eyes, hot and stinging. No. They didn't. You are keeping yourself alive only to suffer, Stain continued. You think suffering is atonement. It is not. It is masturbation. True atonement is fixing what you broke. True atonement is standing up when you have no legs left. Stain leaned in close, his face inches from Izuku's. He smelled of blood and old iron. If you want to die, I will kill you right here. I will end your misery. I will purge the failure of all might. He pressed the knife harder. Izuku felt the skin break. Do I want to die? Izuku looked into the red eyes of the killer. He thought about the silence in his head. He thought about the pain, but then he thought about the letters he wrote. I'm trying to balance the ledger. You can't balance the ledger if you're dead, a voice in his head whispered. It wasn't a vestige. It wasn't a ghost. It was just... Izuku, if I die here, Shigaraki wins. If I die here, Mom is alone forever. A spark ignited in his chest. Not one for all. Just a tiny, fragile ember of refusal. I don't want to die. Stain saw it. He saw the pupil dilate. He saw the fear shift into anger. Stain pulled the knife back. He stood up. So, Stain said, sheathing the dagger. The fire is not out. It is just buried under ash. He looked down at the paralyzed boy. The world is hell now, boy. All might is a shadow. The heroes are broken. The villains run free. We do not need a martyr. We need an Atlas. Someone to hold the sky up, even if his arms break. Stain walked to the window. If I see you seeking death again, Stain warned, looking back, I will grant your wish. But if you seek victory, if you seek to save, then prove to me that All Might was right. He jumped. Stain vanished into the night. Izuku lay there on the dusty floor of the abandoned apartment. The paralysis held him for another 5 minutes. 5 minutes of silence. But this time, the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with Stain's words. It insults them. The paralysis broke. Izuku gasped, his body jerking as control returned. He sat up, clutching his throat where the knife had been. He crawled to the window. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking. A sliver of moonlight cut through the gloom, illuminating the ruined city. Atlas, he whispered. He touched the tattered yellow cape on his shoulders. Gran Torino's cape. He had been wearing it like a mourning veil. A symbol of his failure. But Gran Torino hadn't worn it to mourn. He wore it to fly. Izuku stood up. His legs were shaking, but he locked his knees. He wiped the blood from his cheek. He wasn't All Might. He wasn't the boy with the superpower. He was Izuku Midoriya. He was smart. He was stubborn. And he was still alive. I'm sorry, Gran Torino, he whispered to the moon. I've been an idiot. He didn't go back to the subway. He didn't go back to the hole in the ground. He stayed in the apartment. He found a cleanish rag and began to clean his wounds. He ate a ration bar, forcing himself to chew slowly, to actually digest it instead of just filling the void. He took out his notebook, the one he had been using to track villains. He turned to a fresh page. He didn't write my will. He wrote, Analysis, How to Defeat Shigaraki Without a Quirk. It was an impossible title. A joke, but Izuku stared at it. He began to write. 1. Support items. Need upgrades. The gauntlets need higher voltage. The iron saws need shock absorption. 2. Information. I need to know where they are moving the Hyans. 3. Allies. He paused at the third point. Allies. He had run away to protect them. But Stain was right. Trying to be Atlas alone just meant you got crushed. Even Atlas needed ground to stand on. He wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. He couldn't walk into UA empty-handed. He had to bring something to the table. He had to bring a plan, but he wouldn't run from them if they found him. He looked out at the city. It looked different now. It didn't look like a graveyard. It looked like a puzzle. A broken, dangerous, terrible puzzle, and Izuku Midoriya was good at puzzles. He pulled his hood up. But this time, he didn't slouch. He tightened the straps of his gauntlets. Time to get to work, he said. The ghost was gone. The hero was waking up.